Welcome to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Cooper-Smith, a doctorate-prepared nurse practitioner, and this show is about empowering you to live a radiant, healthy, and balanced life. I'm very excited to introduce today's guest, Ashlyn Schwartz, PhD. She is a public health scientist, speaker, author, and the founder of the collective OM. Did I say that right?
You did.
Excellent. She helps high-achieving individuals move from burnout and stress to intentional, aligned living. So welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with you.
Yes, you're just so interesting to me. You started in academia on a very kind of structured path. And how did you get from that to doing some of the alternative things you do now?
That's quite a question. Ultimately realizing that I was in alignment with my purpose and my intention. So having to have one of those burnout moments, took me getting to that edge to realize it, which is what I'm hoping to help people prevent, is to bring awareness so it doesn't take some life-altering event or this large and elongated state of negativity before you have to make a shift to empower people.
So you were burned out yourself. And then when you were kind of healing yourself, you realized that you could share what you've learned to help other people.
Yes, it's been a really full circle moment of bridging Western science and all my years in academia with the wisdom of the East and seeing how my personal life experiences and everything triangulate.
So how did you said the wisdom of the East, how did you start on that path?
I think I was just sharing with you before we got on here that I ended up in Florida unexpectedly, and I had supported or got a fellowship and it got defunded, and then I had no plan, absolutely no clue what was coming next. And so I just started following experiences that brought me joy and that brought me peace. And that started out with a breathwork class, and then another one, and then yoga. And it led me into this discovery within the holistic world of all these modalities. And they're so enriching. So I've wanted to learn them to increase my toolkit to see which ones might support different people.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit on the show before about breath work. So how can you explain breath work to somebody maybe not familiar?
So I would say it's the conscious manipulation of your breathing for mental, physical, or spiritual health. And it typically could be categorized to increase mental or physical wellness, to enter a flow state, or to command or expand energy. And that's a lot of fancy terminology as far as the structure of breath work, but it's pretty much shifting your body through conscious breathing into a different physiological state. So maybe you're really stressed or overwhelmed, you got a text that upset you, or you're in traffic. And it can be this tool that's free, that's accessible, that just consciously changing how you breathe can shift your physiology and allow you to be healthier.
Do you have a favorite technique? Like, let's say I'm in traffic and I'm like, oh, I'm just going to blow my stack. What would you say that I should do?
There's so many. And what's wonderful about breath work is you have ones for maybe someone that's experiencing anxiety or someone experiencing depression that can either energize or calm your system down. But one, you probably heard of this, I'd imagine. I like it just because it's so simple and easy to do if you're driving even, is the box breath.
Yeah.
And that was used a lot in military backgrounds as well. And that's simply inhaling through the nose, counting to 4, holding your breath for 4 seconds, exhaling through your nose for 4 seconds, and then holding again. And that's a really simple one because you don't have to remember a lot. And you could do it while you're driving. You could do it in the shower. And I would recommend if someone is experiencing anxiety or just a lot of thoughts that keep crumbling in and won't let you rest, that you can also add a visualization to the breath work of imagining your breath being at the top of the crown of your head. And as you exhale, watching your breath go down your front body, doing a body scan all the way down to your tailbone, and maybe noticing where it's lingering. And then when you pause at the bottom and then working back up your back spine, going through different organs and bone structures. So that can be a way to get you out of your head and into your body in the present moment.
Is there a particular amount of time that we need to do that?
It's really profound within, I would say, 2 minutes. You can completely shift your physiology from the sympathetic overdrive to your parasympathetic state of safety, connection, and reset. But most people, even when I teach a yoga class, for example, after, or even personally, just doing a few inhales, a big inhale through the nose, and sometimes you just need to let it out, an open mouth exhale.
Yeah.
Even doing that 3 times for me, I notice a profound impact. So it's, I think like most things, right? If you have a longer duration of an activity or a modality, there could be deeper impacts on it. But the most empowering aspect of breath work is that within just a few seconds, it can make a shift. And of course, if you do a whole hour session, you might have more different outcomes, but it can happen quickly.
Yeah, that's a technique I picked up before, like a difficult conversation. If I know that there's somebody that's going to kind of be taxing for me and I have to really be calm and not reactive to the energy coming at me, I would do the breath work right before and just, keep my heart rate down and just make sure that I can be present in the way I need to be.
Yeah, it's an incredible tool. And I would say another one that pops up in my head that is equally useful, I would say, is a modified Brahmahi or Bumblehi breath. And that's simply inhaling in through the nose and exhaling, putting your lips together and making a hum noise. So inhaling and exhaling. And what's really neat about that is our parasynoids are in our nasal cavity. And so when we're inhaling through our nose, it's actually going to be releasing more nitric oxide, which is also going to support thinking more clearly, as well as activating our parasympathetic system. And when we make more vibrations through this exhale of humming, it's going to be releasing more nitric oxide, which not only helps have more oxygen delivery and clear thinking, but it can also fight bacteria and can be used preventatively if you feel a sickness coming on. So I think it's just a really great technique that's multimodal and can support a lot of different outcomes.
I love how you bridge science with these other modalities, because I never knew that we actually were preventing illness by breathing with vibration. Like, that is just so cool.
Breathwork is fascinating. There's a book I highly recommend, Breath by James Nectar, or I would have to look it up. But it's a big yellow book, and he really gets into breath and all the physiological aspects of it. And when we look at different animal species, even animals that live the longest breathe the less. So there's this relationship between our breath and life expectancy. And we can even think about that if we have a mouse or that breathes over 150 times a minute, and they usually live 1 to 3 years, versus a tortoise or one of those really large turtles. They are typically breathing 4 to 5 times a minute, and they live over 150 years.
Oh, wow.
So breath is completely connected to our lifespan, to our health, and also connected to a lot of disorders that we have, our sleep apnea and asthma, because from an evolutionary biological perspective, we used to be a little better at breathing. We had different shaped noses and jaws. Our noses were a little flatter. And from eating so many processed foods, the shape of our face has changed, because foods used to be really fibrous and you had to chew. Mm-hmm. And it shifted and pushed our noses upwards. And then our prefrontal cortex and our brain developed more and got bigger, which also pushed into our sinuses, and which has led to a lot of humans mouth breathing more instead of nasal breathing, which can lead to having drier air as well, because our nose is the system for humidification. So not only is it for nitric oxide and all these health benefits, it's really multimodal of why breath work is so important and that we're really bad at breathing.
Yeah, I was just reading a book by somebody who talked a lot about nose breathing and how when we're mouth breathing, we're not filtering out the toxins even. And so we're just really disrupting our health by not breathing through the nose.
Yes.
Especially at night, which a lot of us will, our mouth does drop open at night. And there are ways to not do that. I haven't quite subscribed to that yet, but have you heard of that as well? To at night keep your mouth closed so that you breathe through the nose.
Maybe.
Different. Huh?
I think it's challenging to control what you're doing when you're sleeping.
Yes.
But theoretically, it could support a lot.
So you mentioned activating the parasympathetic nervous system. So can you explain to people what that is and, as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system?
Yeah, so we give stress a bad rep, and there's actually a historical reason, like all our physiological processes, that we have a stress response, and it keeps us safe and for survival. Because the historical example is if we were in the jungle with a saber-toothed tiger, thank goodness we have a stress response because it's gonna
Get out.
Yeah, we're allowed to get out. So we know that part. So the whole stress response, it can be encapsulated within the autonomic nervous system, which just means any functions that are happening naturally. So without thinking, automatically, our respiration, our breathing, our thermoregulation. And so within the autonomic nervous system, we have a sympathetic system and our parasympathetic nervous system. And those are often coined, you probably heard the terms of fight or flight for our sympathetic, or our parasympathetic is our rest and digest system. And when our stress response is activated, typically we're going to activate the sympathetic nervous system drive, which historically was good to get us out of danger, but now we're chronically stressed. And it releases our catecholamines, our epinephrine, adrenaline, and it also releases our glucocorticoids, such as our cortisol. And over time, being chronically stressed, this can degrade tissues, degrade health, and have really negative impacts on our health. Versus a parasympathetic nervous system is a system that's activated in safety and connection and regulation. And in that state, we can make clear decisions because the way our brain is built is from this bottom up aspect. If you think of a ladder, for the first 5 years of our life, the first things that are developing is our brainstem. So that is going to be those autonomic functions. And then we have our limbic system, which is going to be our emotions and our attachment. That's a second ladder. And our third system is going to be that prefrontal cortex, which is our higher cortical level thinking. And so if we want to make great decisions, we need that prefrontal cortex to make choices, right? But what happens is we get stressed. And so we're at the beginning of that ladder. And our amygdala, which is the center of fear, gets activated, and then ultimately we aren't able to make good choices. We might be more reactive in a relationship. And so it can lead to a lot of negative choices that we aren't even aware of. And ultimately we're giving our power away to stress instead of taking that driver's seat back.
Yep. And it has physical consequences too. So, and that's chronically being activated, that system is going to raise our blood pressure and just kind of affect all kinds of overall well-being. So it's very, very important.
It is. And that really hits home of why I do all this work is because I was the person who didn't listen to any of the...
Very type A.
Yes, very type A. I didn't listen to any of the signals. And I call them signals because this is all information that we can have is, okay, maybe my heart's beating fast. Mm-hmm. And at first that's all right because then we can address it. But over time it can lead to, as you were mentioning, high blood pressure, maybe cardiovascular disease risk. And for me, not addressing stress led to copious health issues, to many surgeries. I would argue going down a career path that wasn't aligned with the direction I wanted. And ultimately, I would argue, too, untreated stress leads to mental health and substance use challenges, and ultimately led to my brother's passing, which is why I care so much about this, is because stress has impacted me and my family. And then after living in Europe for a few years, when I came back, I saw in a different light how stressed out the United States is.
Yes.
And this is an epidemic that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. You had asked me before we started what motivated me to start the podcast. And I also have been very type A directed. And I've shared on the show before that when I turned 50, I started to think, okay, maybe there's another way here. And so part of my exploration of some of those paths is this show and people like you.
Oh, it sounds like a beautiful exploration because there's this duality with stress. And I'd like to bring in the word achievement too, that led us to a lot of great things. I mean, you have a beautiful practice and are a doctor and have impacted so many people in the community and now further out with your podcast as well. And so there's a good level of stress that can support our growth. But I'm trying to help teach people how to use stress as a moral compass to understand, is this leading me away from myself? And what is or to myself? And then what is the motivation for me choosing this outcome or for this thing I've signed up for? And where is that leading me?
Excellent. Well, I'm going to have you hold that thought. We're going to pause for a break from our sponsor. You're listening to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. I'm Dr. Amy Cooper-Smith, and my guest today is Ashlyn Schwartz. And before the break, we were talking about your journey from academia and how it led you to helping people and your exploration of Eastern arts and just things that help you feel more aligned with your purpose. And you're sharing that with others. And that's just such a great story.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be heard.
Yes. So also before the break, you mentioned your brother and how that was a significant inspiration for you to take this journey. So what happened there?
Yeah, so my brother was 26 and I was 23, and he passed away from an opioid overdose. And at that time when he passed, he was my best friend and the closest person to me. And I wanted the answer to questions of why did this happen and how can I make it stop? Which ultimately led me to switch my whole field of study. I had been in kinesiology, working as an exercise physiologist for 6 years, and led me to get my PhD in public health sciences and become a substance use disorder researcher and a mental health advocate. And part of that first question of why is this happening? And I wanted to learn from a different cultural perspective, what is the challenge with substance use? And the more I got into the research, I noticed this association with what happens in our youth. And I studied a lot on adverse childhood experiences, which are stressful or potentially traumatic events that occur in the first 18 years of our life that are associated with a lot of different negative health outcomes. And so ultimately trying to get closer and closer to this root cause of what happened with my brother, it didn't really even hit me that it was all related to stress, and that these forms of stress, if they're untreated, our beliefs, the lifestyles that we're living lead to mental health challenges, which then can lead to substance use disorders. And so I've always been a prevention researcher in exercise physiology. We always say exercise is medicine, and working on prevention. And I had this realization that even though I thought I was doing everything in prevention, it was actually a form of treatment. That exercising is treating and releasing a stressor.
Yep.
But what is that root cause of the stressor? What was that for my brother, and what was that in my life? And the more I've gotten into it is a lot of our beliefs, and that happen when we're in our childhood, and so helping people uncover that. And the first step, though, from a public health perspective, is how can we get people from the stress and reactivity to start getting to those deeper beliefs? Starts with that level of awareness. And I built a Regulate, Reflect, Reconnect program and training that I do that helps people in real time. That's a very simple program to get some control, and so stress isn't taking the driver's seat. So we can have awareness of our stress signals, so then we can make a shift and get more in aligned action with our purpose and uncovering what that is, because sometimes achievement leads us further away from ourselves. So really this idea of undoing and coming back to ourself is what I've been working on. And then once people are there, then getting to those root causes of what are these beliefs I've had. And for example, for me, one was needing to feel worthy of love was through achievement. And so feeling inadequate and not worthy. And so recognizing then, once you uncover these beliefs, am I making this decision because it's related to my belief? Is it related to my achievement? You can, once you're able to separate and have more awareness and detach, then you can make better informed decisions going forward, so you aren't recreating these same patterns, and you get a lot more agency.
It's fascinating that what happens in our childhood affects us even when we're old. Like, it's like, oh yeah, when you were 2, this happened. Now, I didn't know that you and I were going to have this connection when we met, but I also lost a brother to a drug-related situation. So when you said that, I was like, oof, it kind of hit home. But it's such an epidemic, like you said, and it's hard to find somebody who hasn't had this experience one way or another, of been affected by substance abuse.
It is. It's really one of those 6 degrees of separation, and you sharing that, I really got chills. I'm really so sorry for your loss. And you were asking me about my journey of really coming to these holistic practices. And part of it was after working over 12 years in my education and working with some lead researchers on the opioid epidemic when I was in Ireland as an assistant professor there. I felt people's motivations were just to get their name on publications. And my heart's always been really making an impact. And while policy and research does make a certain level impact, I felt very distal from where I wanted to be making that impact. And I couldn't help but thinking, how is this one article that's getting cited going to support people like my brother or the families that are being touched? And that ultimately led me to make that journey. And I really believe stress took over so much of my time, and I'm grateful that I have my PhD and I've had these experiences. But I do believe if I hadn't have been operating under so much stress for so many years, I would have stayed more aligned with that level of impact I wanted to make, which has always been an interpersonal connection and communities, working with people. And so I think stress and achievement took me down a road that wasn't really mine to walk. And so that's why I'm hopefully getting this message out for people. So,
do you think we have to kind of sometimes go down those paths to be able to recognize it and then to be able to overcome it?
I mean, that's probably a very philosophical question. Maybe. I think for some people, often we don't make a change until we go through this relationship or a breakup, or we've lost our jobs, we hit rock bottom. So sometimes it does take something of that nature to spark that desire to change. Yeah, a catalyst. But I also believe if we were teaching in early childhood and education, a color wheel and our feelings and breathwork tools, some of these really simple nervous system regulation skills, that maybe it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe that we can learn before it's an end cause. Maybe we can learn that first little sign of, oh, my heart's beating fast and I don't feel safe around this person. So maybe I'm not going to get in this relationship that was narcissistic or abusive or whatever it might be. But why can't we prevent that?
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? So you mentioned the breath work is one of our tools. What other tools do you have in your arsenal to help?
There's a lot of tools. I know we were talking a little about yoga. I also do teach yoga, and I love yoga for so many reasons, but really because it's this philosophy and it's a way of being, of controlling the mind to free it from afflictions. So ultimately we can have better self-control. And so it's not just a series of postures that you do in a sequence. It's really how you are living your life on and off a mat. It is being ethical to others and nonviolence and being truthful, of having self-discipline. And ultimately, yoga actually, only the physical posture started about 100 years ago. In India, where it originated, it was always about what we call the 8 limbs of yoga. The last few limbs of yoga are all about pretty much meditation, withdrawing our senses, concentrating, meditating, and ultimately having bliss through controlling our mind. So all that to be said, I believe there's a lot of practices. Yoga is one of them, but something I do support people with a lot is through meditation and just this awareness of our breath, of our bodies and what's happening, and that just starting your day with a simple meditation. It doesn't have to be 5 minutes or 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour-long yoga class, but starting to have this awareness and can be very profound.
Yeah, I do think I was listening to a show, and this person was talking about yoga, and she was talking about a lot of its origin and the way you did. And she said, I'm not hating on people that do it this way, but she kind of was disappointed in the booty yoga or, the yoga to rock music and things like that. Because she said, that's not what it's about. But what are your thoughts about maybe non-traditional yoga?
Yeah. That's a question. I think at the end of the day, the best form of exercise is something that someone will do.
Yes.
And so I believe if someone loves rock yoga or dance yoga or whatever it might be, if that's their way of having community and connection and supporting themselves, that's great. I think anyone finding that mind-body connection or any modality of regulation tools. And we have breath work, we have journaling, we have practicing gratitude, doing mindful meditations, walks. It's endless. Yeah. And it's a toolkit. And ultimately, it's that self-discovery of what works with you. In my personal practice, I prefer my yoga to be aligned with the breath. So as we inhale, we're opening up our front body, and exhaling, going lower to the ground. But maybe everyone doesn't need that, or that comes at a later level. It all depends on where we're at in the journey and finding where you are in something that works and supports your path.
Yeah, I like that. It's what works best for you and for you. So we're almost out of time, but you also just released a book about poetry. So can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yes, yeah, it is called Rose Kiss Promises, and it is a poetry book walking readers through 7 stages of love, all through the metaphor of a rose. And ultimately, that is from falling in love, being the rosebud, all the way to the thorns, and ultimately back to a garden of self-love. And this book was really inspired as I shifted a lot of things in my life and realized there was a lot of pieces of me that I had hidden. And part of my undoing or unbecoming was becoming closer to myself and practicing more self-love. And so this book is very authentic and goes through harsh feelings and that are authentic to my journey, but ultimately has this golden arc that leads people to love themselves or question something through a different light of how is this relationship a mirror of me, and what could I learn from that? And maybe there was this traumatic thing that happened, or if something I had and it was beautiful and now it's gone, but understanding that relationship would change and that it is all right. And so this is the first book in my trilogy that's called Growing into Sunflowers. And it's that title because like the sunflowers are rooted in their self-establishment and their boundaries, and they shift and grow towards the light. And that's what I'm hoping readers will get through this book, is that shift of perspective, that things happen in seasons. It's not forever. And we can't control what happens to us in life, but we can control how we respond to it. And empowering people through our mindset, that is so powerful.
Oh, I can't wait to check that out.
Thank you.
So how can people connect with you and find out more about you?
A lot of options. I have a website. My company is The Collective Om, so www.thecollectiveom.com. Also Instagram, Facebook. I'm around in the Jacksonville area. I'm primarily focused on doing speaking engagements and trainings at the moment.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
And thanks to our listeners for tuning in to Energize and Revitalize with Dr. Amy. Do you have insights from this show? Send me an email at radiantpodcast2025@gmail.com. Check out past episodes on our YouTube channel, and we're also featured on Apple Podcasts and all your favorite platforms. I'll be back next Saturday morning at 7:30 with more expert insights and practical strategies to help you live a healthy life. Until then, here's to your best life.